So once again, I want to welcome every one of us to this class. It's our second lesson for ABRSM grade 2 level in terms of rudiment of music. So for today, we'll be looking at grouping of notes and rest. So just let me share my screen. 1 minute. I believe everybody can see my screen now. Is that correct? I think you're seeing the wrong screen. Just can you see my screen now?
Yes, sir.
All right. So we'll be looking at grouping of notes and rests. You've done that's the second part now, because you've done a part of grouping of notes and rests while you were in grade 1. So technically, we're just extending it. So we're looking at how do you group notes and rest, basically within the time signature that you learned last week. You know, last week you looked at new sets of time signature. Do you remember? Yes, you looked at new sets. So how do you group? But please don't forget the way you group notes, because whatever we are teaching you now is an addition to what you've been taught in grade 1. And during your exam, you can be asked questions from even grade 1. Do you understand? So therefore, it's very important that you don't just say, okay, I've finished, I just, answered from grade 1, I'm now in grade 2, I just learn new things that doesn't correlate or doesn't kind of have any relationship with grade 1 stuff. So this is an extension of what you've done in grade 1. Now let's get to it. Today, our learning outcome will be, by the end of the class, you should be able to know how to group notes in simple time. Now, there are general rules for grouping notes, but there are exceptions. So it's important for you to know both the rules and the extensions. And we'll now focus on meaning beats, also how to group notes in meaning beats time, because last week I know you looked at meaning beats, whether it's 2-2 or 2-4, you looked at all those meaning beats, So we're going to see how to group notes in meaning beats. And then when you're also grouping notes, we're going to see how do you position the stems. When we talk about stems, we're talking about notes like quavers to semiquavers, those notes that have stems. Even we're talking of notes like crotchets and meaning crochet. So I beg your pardon, stems are different from hooks. So the notes that have stems, they start from meaning, am I right? The stem, then you have the crochets, the quavers, and the like. So how do you, where does the stem face when you are grouping notes together? And then we'll see if you now have rests with notes, how do you group notes and rests together? Okay, so that's what we intend to cover today. Now let's get to it. So now there are rules for grouping simple time signature. There are rules for grouping simple time signature. The first rule I want you to know is avoid ties where possible. Avoid ties where possible. Rather, you should use dotted notes or the equivalent notes of those notes that are tied together instead. What do I mean? If you look at the example we have here, 2-4, all right? Instead of, because of course, a tie is different from a slur. Hope we remember that. A tie joins two notes that are on the same pitch. So those two notes that you are joining, why don't you just make them one note? And if you need to add a dot, so that instead of, so for example, if you look at this now, what you see on the slide there, the 2-4, you see, instead of using a crochet and then you are tying it to a quaver, why don't you just have a dotted crochet? which is the same thing as a dotted and a crochet and a quiver. So try to avoid ties. There are some places you may not be able to avoid ties, like if the ties cross over a bar, you can't because it's a different bar now, but you just tying from one note at the end of your bar to another note at the beginning of your bar, you may not be able to avoid. Where possible, another instance where you should try to avoid, ties as much as possible. Also, if you look at all these examples are things you can play around with on your own. If you look at 2/4, for example, the third one, you have a quiver, am I right? Then you have two quavers that are tied together. I'm looking at the one on your right. Two quavers that are tied together. You don't need to tie those two quavers together. You could have just said they are crochets. Because if you tie them together, you are still going to play them as crochet. Am I right? Because you tied those two quavers. So you play one and you hold it. So it's a crochet you are playing actually. So instead of the idea is that reduce verbosity, reduce the volume of music, and make things simple. That's the idea. Make things what? Simple. The same thing, if you look at, for example, the 3/4 that is down, you have a crochet by the right hand, and then you have a two crochet that are tied together. You could have just made them a meaning. Why tie them together when you can make them a meaning? So understand that principle that where you see ties, ask yourself, can I just collapse these ties into one note? It may be that I will need to add a dot if it is a note and its half that are tied together, or I may need to just add the equivalent of the sum of the two notes. Do we understand that? If you have questions, please unmute and ask your questions as we go on. I forgot to say that you are free to ask your questions as we progress. So please, if you have questions, unmute and then ask your questions. Okay? So the next thing now is another rule I want to talk about is do not beam more than 4 quavers or semi-quavers at a time. Hope you know what a quiver note is. We remember quiver, semi-quiver. You can only beam 4 quavers together at a time or 4 semi-quavers at a time, except if the time signature is 3/4 or 3/8. So if the time signature is 3/4 or 3/8, then you can beam more than 4 quavers or more than 4 semi-quavers. But if it is not 3/4, if it is not 3/8, why do we say 3/4? These are threes, and you will find out any time signatures that are in threes, you can make them instead of making them in. So if it is in threes, for example, these are 3/4, 3/8. In triple, it's triple time, all right? So that means if you make it triple, you can end up having 6 quavers or 6 semi-quavers because it's triple. So, but anything that is not triple time, like 2/2, 2/4, 4/4, 4/2, all those ones should be the maximum you can beam together should be 4 quavers at a time. So if you look at this now, this 2/4, how many quavers are beamed together? 4 quavers. So when you are beaming, when you are grouping quavers, you join the beams into one beam. So you see, you don't need to divide this into 2, you don't need to break it into 2/2. No, just join the 4 together. If the 4 quavers are together, instead of making them to stand individually as one quiver, just beam them together. It looks nicer. Now, I talked about 3/4. In 3/4 or in 3/8, in 3/4, you can beam 6 quavers. Remember, I gave you the exception. The exception to this 4 quiver rule or 4 semi-quiver rule is if it is 3/4, you can beam 6 quavers. If it is 3/8, you can beam 6 semi-quavers. That means you can fill up the bar with, you can beam all the notes in that make up that bar. If they are all quavers or semi-quavers, you can beam everything together. The other thing, the rule is that beam quavers together up to a bar in 2/4 or 3/4 time and have a half bar in 4/4. Now you may ask yourself the question, what do I mean? Let me explain to you what I mean. What I mean is that if your time, so before you beam notes, you have to look at the time signature. If it is 2/4, then you can beam, if you have a bar that has a quiver, you know, 2/4 is just 2 crochet beats, am I right? So those 2 crochet beats is the same thing as 4 quavers. So it means you can beam all the 4 quavers together, the complete bar, beam all the 4 quavers together. Whether it is 2/4 or 3/4, in the case of 3/4, you can beam all the quavers that make up that bar, which will now be 6 quavers, because 3/4 is 3 crochets in a bar. If you divide it further, it will be 6 quavers in a bar. So you can beam all the quavers that makes up 3/4 or all the quavers that make up 2/4, but you cannot beam all the quavers in 4/4. How many quavers are you going to have in 4/4? Let me ask you. How many quavers are you going to have in 4/4? Quickly, please.
Said no more than
No. Let's say not. How many quavers are you supposed to have in 4/4? Not beaming now. If you break all the notes in 4/4 into quavers, how many quavers will you have?
8.
Brilliant. 8. You can't beam 8 semi-quaver. It will look very wide, you know. And another reason again why, I'll tell you another reason why you can, we've said it before, why you cannot be, if you were in the class, I remember what we did in grade 1. This is what you should do. You beam the first half and leave the other half, or you take the other half and beam the other ones. The reason is because you have the first beat, you have the second beat, then there should be a difference between the second beat and the third beat. Because in 4/4, you have a strong beat, a weak beat, a strong beat, a weak beat. So you can't tie a weak beat to a strong beat. You can't tie 2 to 3. So 1 and 2 crochets, the first and the second crochets, which forms 4 semi-quavers, can be tied together. And then you can now tie the third and the fourth notes together. So instead of tying the 8 crochets, the 8 quavers together, or beaming the 8 quavers together, you can beam them in 4 separate and then 4 separate. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Sister Miriam, welcome.
Good evening, sir.
All right, as you can see, we're all switching our video. This is my own class. My class, you know, everybody's switching on video because that's the way I teach you, because I want to see I want to get feelers because it's so if you don't mind, please, get settled and let's do that, please. Thank you.
I'm currently in the hospital, so I might not be able to.
All right, okay, don't worry. I don't know. All right, it's okay, don't worry. All right, that's fine. Yeah, all right. All right, so do we understand? So 2/4, 3/4, you can beam more the semi-quavers because they are not more than 4 semi-quavers. Sorry, you can beam more the quavers because they are not more than 4 quavers or 6 quavers in the case of 3/4. But in the case of 4/4, where you have 8 quavers, if you want to fill up everything with quavers, then you can't just beam 8 quavers. It will look so like you are building a long bridge and it will be difficult to read the music. And also, you are making us to lose the third strong beat. So that third strong beat must stand on its own as a beginning note. So that's the I guess we've talked about that also. All right. Now remember to preserve the middle. So I've talked about this. Remember to preserve the middle bar or the middle beats of a 4/4 time. You see, if you look at the 4/4 time, we did do the first and the second beats together, then the third and the fourth beats together. So you have to preserve that middle, right? Very important. That's why you don't tie everything together. Yeah, so you could do it like, you look at this. This is wrong. Do you see that this is wrong? Do you know why this is wrong? Who can tell me why this is wrong? Who can tell me why this is wrong?
Is it because the weak and the strong beats are beamed together.
Yes, the second and we can't find the middle bar there again. You've beamed everything together. You understand? There should be how do I do this now? It's not okay. All right. There should be a separating line somewhere, somewhere here. All right. There should be a separating line. So you should cut this together so that we preserve this middle. We must always preserve this middle. Do we understand it now? So this is wrong. You don't bar like begin like this. So this is what you should do. This is what you should do. Do you get it? Yeah. Avoid beaming notes in threes, in 3/4, so that you don't confuse them as 6/8. Now, if you look at this 3/4, here, if you see this 3/4 here, what they are saying is that it's better you beam all the 6, because I told you that in 3/4, 3/8, you can beam in 6. All right? Because 3/3, you can beam in 6. Don't divide this into 2 and say you want to beam this 3 and beam this 3. If you do that, you are turning the music to 6/8. You are confusing it with 6/8. Because in this, and this is compound time, but I'm not going to go into it now because you don't need, we'll talk about that maybe in grade 3 or 4. So this is compound time. So in 3/4 or in 3/8, group in 6, group all the beams together. Don't divide them into 3s and say, I want to group these 3s, then these 3s. Once you start dividing a bit into 3s, then it is compound time. The difference between compound time and simple time is that in simple time, you can divide into 2s. In compound time, you divide in 3s. So now you see you have divided this in 3s. It's now compound time. That is why you don't avoid beaming in 3s, so that you don't confuse what is a simple time to what is a compound time. Okay? Please, if you have your questions, please ask your questions. So, for example, this, you don't do this. Who can tell me why this is wrong? And what should you do? How will you correct this? Because what they will do for you in your exam is that they will give you a piece of long music and they will put all these wrong notes there. They will tell you to rewrite that music, beaming them correctly. So how will you beam this? Is this correct? With what I just talked about now, yeah. Is this correct?
Are you talking about the last one? The last picture?
Yeah, the last picture, yes, this one.
So that means you have to put 2 quavers, beam 2 quavers together, and then leave the other.
So which two are you going to pick? Is it the first 2 quavers or the last 2 quavers?
2.
So you beam the last 2 quavers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's like you cut it from here, am I right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see whether you are correct. Yes, you are correct. So instead of putting the whole 3, you break it and let one stand on it, so that anybody that see this now will know that this note is divided in 2s. It's because the 3/4 is a simple time signature. So your note should be in 2s, or if you can't do the 6 back beam together, then do them in 2s and not in 3s, so that you don't confuse them with the compound time. Okay, so let's move on. Now, let's go to rules for grouping notes, meaning beats, time signature. Now, you did all this time signature with Sister Miriam last week. You did 2/2, 3/2, 4/2. What is common among these beats is that the standard beat there is a meaning note. Am I right? The standard beat is a meaning note. Now, how do you group meaning beats? How do you group meaning beats? Use semi-brief, not tied meanings where possible. I told you about tied notes. If you can avoid tied notes, then please avoid it by all means. instead of using two meanings that are tied, just use a semi-brief note, all right? Just like I showed you in the beginning of the class. So something like this, instead of using this, just put a semi-brief note. Since this two tied, you will still play it as a semi-brief. So why don't you just put the semi-brief to avoid confusion? Do not beam more than 4 quavers at a time. I've said this before. Apart from 3/4 or 3/8, do not beam more than 4 quavers at a time. I'm just repeating some of the things I've said. Beam together a group of 4 quavers. That's what I said. Do not beam more than 4 quavers at a time. That group of 4 quavers is like it's a meaning. So it's a meaning. Or you also beam a group of 4 semiquavers. So when you are grouping quavers or semiquavers, you shouldn't group more than 4 at a time. You shouldn't group more than 4 at a time. This is just an example. This is 3/2. You see, 3 meanings in a bar. And you can see they grouped, instead of grouping everything like this, no, you group 4, you group 4, you group 4. Now, let's go to rules for grouping 3/8. Rules for grouping 3/8. Now, when I talked about 3/4 or 3/8, there are exceptions, to those, the general rule is don't group more than 4 these, don't group more than 4 quavers or group more than 4 semiquavers. But for 3/8, you can beam all the quavers or semiquavers to make a bar. So what that means is that how many semiquavers would you have in a 3/8? How many semiquavers would you have in a 3/8?
6.
6, because 3/8 is 3 quavers. If you break the quavers into 2/2, you have 6. Now you can group those 6 semiquavers together. The rule of 4 does not apply to this. All right? The rule of 4 does not. This is an exception. I told you 3/4, 3/8. You can always group either if it is this is 3/8. Because you can just group all of them. I told you that don't group in 3s now, but you can group in 3s here because these are the only notes there. But if it is like 3/4, all right, where if this is 3/4, where you have 6 quavers, you can group this in 3/3. But if those 3 quavers is just 3/8 is just 3/8, 3 quavers, you can group all the 3 quavers that make up that bar. So please understand this thing. 3/4, you can't group 3 quavers in 3s because after you group those 3 quavers, there will be another 3 quavers waiting for you. And you shouldn't group in 3s. But if it is 3/8, just a single 3, 1 through 3, you can group all of them and nothing else is remaining. So either you group all of them as 3/8 in semiquavers, 6 semiquavers, or in 3 quavers. Now let's talk about stem position. Stem position. It's very important sometimes when beaming notes with stems facing different directions, the order follows the stem direction of the note, which is farthest from the middle line of the stem. Now, what do I mean? Sometimes, because beaming of notes when you are beaming notes, please take note, when you are beaming notes, it doesn't mean that all the notes you are beaming are on the same pitch. No. They are all semiquavers or they are all quavers, but they can be in different pitches. One can be up, another one can be down, another one. But you have to, when you are now, because you'll be asked to rewrite the notes, you make sure you put those notes in their position, but you now find a way to make the beams to go together. If you look at this, for example, look at these 2 notes. This is here, this is here. And you need to beam these 2 together. So would you beam, because if you beam, it means the stems will have to face one direction. There's no way you can't beam like this. You can't beam like this. Am I right? You can't beam like this. It's either all the stems go up and then you beam together, or all the stems go down and then you beam together. Now, how do you know whether the stems should go up or whether the stems should go down? The question you will ask yourself is, which of these 2 notes is farther from the middle line? The first or the second one?
The second.
Farthest from the middle line.
Second.
Is the second note farthest from, what's the middle line, the third line on the stave? Which note is far, more far?
Oh, yeah, the first one.
Naomi, are you with us? I've not heard your voice since. Are you understanding what we are doing?
Yes.
Okay. So the first one, because you see, the second one is close to the middle line. The first one is first. So this second one, we have to assume the stem of this first one. That is why you see, we change the second one now, and we put the stem up to align with the note that is farthest from the, that's why you do it like this, and then you can now put together. You don't do it like this. You don't, because this one already is far from the middle line. All right. If you bring this one down, it will make the stem so long, unwieldily long, to connect with this one. So remember, the rule is the note that is farthest from the middle. If you have 10 notes, or let's say no, if you have 4 quavers and you want to beat them together and they are in different places, look for the quiver that is the farthest from the middle line and let all the other quavers switch and follow the position of that quiver that is farthest from the middle line, and you can beam everything together. But please remember, when you are switching from like this one now, you see, is down, all right? But when you are switching, this stem will move from the left position down to the right position up. Don't go and switch and write something like this in the exam, all right? Because you say, oh, this one is at the left, but I'm switching that. No, that's to be, you should know that by now. Groups, rules for grouping rests. Rules for grouping rests. Now, if you have what you call O bar rest, what do I mean by O bar rest? O bar rest is, let's assume, in a piece of music, there are no music, everything is rest for that particular bar. How do you represent it? You put a semi-brief rest to show a complete bar rest. So that means that you should have something like this. So if you are given a piece of exam and then they put, for example, crochet rest, crochet rest, crochet rest, crochet rest, 4 crochet rests, and why put 4 crochet rests? Remember, fewer is better. Remove all the 4 crochet rests. It doesn't matter whether it's 2-2, whatever time signature it is. If all that bar is rest, don't start being, just put a semi-brief rest. It shows that that bar is just rest, no matter what the time signature is. So this is the standard practice. Rules for grouping rest. Rules for grouping rest. Now I'll talk about it because you can have, remember, music is not only about notes. It is musical notes and musical rest. Now, every beat should have its own rest in grouping. So if you are giving an exam and they put notes and different rests and they ask you to regroup, when you are rewriting those notes, you have to be careful about how you group the rest too. So you're not only thinking about grouping the note, you're also thinking about grouping the rest. Now look at this, for example. I said every beat must have its own rest. Look at this. Okay, this is 3-4, am I right? This is 3-4. 3-4 means 3 crochet, okay? So what is the standard beat there? I want somebody to talk. That's why I want response. That's why I said we should on our video so that I can get response. I'm not just talking to an empty class. What's the standard beat?
Sir, what do you mean by standard beat?
So if you look at a time signature, what note will be 1 beat? That's the standard beat. The beat that counts as 1 note, as 1 beat. The note that counts as 1 beat.
It's a crochet.
It's a crochet. That's the standard beat. That's what we call the standard beat. If you look at, so all this is 3-4. It means that if you have a note that is not up to that standard beat, then you have to use the rest that will make it complete with the standard beat. That's why it says every beat should have its own rest. So this is quiver is not complete yet. So if the rest that should follow it should be a quiver rest, so that quiver and quiver is complete. So this is like this guy is looking for his partner to make a complete person. Then you have one beat rest, one beat rest. The same thing with this. This completes this. All right? This completes this to have, because the standard note here is a minim note, as you can see. So this completes it. So each bar, each rest note must have its own rest. Now, if you look at this is correct, because this is already, this standard beat here is 3/4. So it means crochet. Crochet rest is already there, is correct. Now, this here combines with this to make one crochet, so which is the standard beat. Then you have this. So it means, think about it, that every note must have its own rest. So what that means is that in exam, they will give you notes and they can put different types of rests. You have to sit down and start rearranging it and say, okay, this note, should it be this rest that will follow this note? Or can I divide this rest? Because there are sometimes we need to divide the rest into two, all right? So that the half of that rest will complete the note that comes before it, or the note that goes after it, and then you now have the other rest completing the other one. So it's very important. I think rules for grouping rest, few is better. Few is better. So given that the main rule, what's the main rule? The main rule is this: every beat must have its own rest. As long as you achieve that main rule, use as few rests as possible. Just like using as few notes as possible, rather than tying notes, and then you have plenty notes. Why don't you just put all those notes as one? The same thing. You look at this, they can give you something like this in the exam. And they say, okay, if this is not correct, then rewrite it. Of course, what they just want you to do, you can't rewrite this because this is a note, all right? You can't rewrite it, but you can rewrite this rest and say, okay, this is a quiver, this is a quiver note. So this quiver rest complements it as one crochet, all right? As one crochet. Complements it as one crochet. So it means that these other two, I can just combine them together as one crochet, because they're not complementing anything. So that at the end of the day, I have something like this. The same thing with this. Look at this now. The only thing you need to do is that, remember I talked about giving the main rule. What's the main rule? The main rule is that this note is not complete. Which rest will complete it? This one. Every other thing, can I reduce them? So this one now, you can reduce it as crochet and crochet. So instead of having 6 rests or 4 rests, you have 2 rests. So few is better. Rules for grouping rest, quadruple time. The same rule for beaming notes in quadruple time applies here. Specifically, a 2-beat rest should not be applied in the middle of a quadruple time. All right? So you don't put a 2-beat rest in between the second and the third beat of a 4/4. You see that you use it to start the first beat, or you use it to start the second half, that's the third beat. Now, what do I mean? This is this. You see that you use this is a 2-beat rest, a minim rest. So you see that you start with a minim rest, and then this is it, because I told you in 4/4, you must, the third, you can't beam or block the second and the third and join them together. No, that's second, there has to be a separation. So what this means is, for example, that you can't have something like this. Let me just see if I can do that. So note that our time is gone. I'll just have to. So you can't have something like this. So this is a crochet. And then you now have a 2-beat rest here. Eh? And then you now have another crochet here. You can't have this. Why? Because we don't know where we can't find the middle again. You have combined both the second and the third. Now, if you are giving this type of something in exam, what will you do? Sister Naomi, what will you do?
I would group I would group the 2 notes.
Which 2 notes will you group?
The 2 notes before the bar.
Which are the 2 notes before the bar?
The 2 notes.
Which
The
2
2
notes
notes.
are before the bar?
So the 2 notes before the bar. The 2 crochet notes.
You will group them, so you will move it from that position and go and put it in another position. You can't move a note from its position, it has to remain there. And there's no way you can group this because it doesn't, I mean, how do you want to do it? You can only play around with the rest so that you can still make that demarcation between second and third. And what do you need to do? Does anybody want to help?
But from what you're explaining, we can't have 2 crochet rest in the middle.
This is not 2 crochet rest. This is a minim rest, which is 2 beats
I know.
rest.
Nice. If you divide it into 2, it will be 2 crochet rests.
Yes, so what do you want us to divide it into 2?
Yeah, if you cannot move it around, then we have to divide the rest into 2. But is it allowed to have 2 rests in the middle?
Yeah, you can have 2 rests as long because you can have 2 rests. Sister Naomi, you want to jump in again?
I wasn't quite sure about which one you were asking me about.
Oh, sorry, this one.
Yeah, that's why I didn't really understand what you meant.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so this one now, what you need to do is, remember every note have to have its own rest. This note is a crochet. The rest, then you just divide this into a crochet rest and a crochet rest. Then already you divided the whole two, the half is complete. This is 1/2, then this is another half. So the middle is there. So if you are rewriting it, you don't write it, just divide it so that you have 2 crochet. This crochet note has its own crochet rest. This crochet rest has its own crochet note. And everybody is happy. Do you understand the point now? So for 4/4, remember you don't block that, never block second and third thing, whether it is notes or rest. You have to look for a way to work about. Now, rules for grouping notes, for grouping rest, there are some exceptions. Where you need to use rest of less than a beat, group notes plus rest in half beats. Now, what does that mean? If you look at this, for example, this is 2/4. All right, let's look at this side. Let's look at it from this side. Let's look at it from this side. Now, this is 2/4. Okay. How do you group this? How do you group this? If you look at this, these notes, do you see these notes? What note is this? What note is this?
Semiquiver.
Semiquiver. What rest is this?
Is
Sister now?
quiver.
Quiver rest. So you see, and they said every note must have its own rest. So this note is not having its own, so it means this rest is not supposed to be for this note. So what you need to do is to break this rest into 2 so that you end up having a semiquiver rest like this. So this is this one now, you see, semiquiver rest. Then the other semiquiver rest will now belong to these notes. And then you now have a crochet note. So please understand that every note must have an equivalent rest. You may need to break the rest so that the rest can align with the notes. And when you break the rest, please be sure that the other rest that will be remaining also aligns with the note coming after. You get what I mean? So you don't just look at broken the note, this one aligns with this one. Does the other one remain? Does it align with the other one? That is what it's trying to say there. The same thing with this one. If you look at this, this is 2-2. And if you look at this, this is a quiver note, and then you put a crochet rest. No, every note should have its own rest. It's equal union. So you have to break this, all right? Now, look at this. This is tricky. This is tricky. This is tricky. Look at this, because you have to be you have to look at it very well. This, let me see if I can just rub this off. Okay, good. So if you look at this, now, what will you do here naturally? Naturally, you just, okay, let me break this into quiver, am I right? So that this one we can have this. But if you do it like that now, you're now left with 2 quivers again, am I right? You are now left with this quiver and this quiver. Remember, few is better. Few is better. And since this quiver is not complementing this one, so there's no point leaving it there. This quiver and this quiver, just mesh them and they become crochets. And that's the same thing they also did here too. So make sure that you use a note, a rest to complement a note. If the other rest is not complementing the other note, just join the other rests that are remaining, join them together if they can give you one single rest. I think we're almost there now. Rules for grouping notes with rest. So this is the last one. Notes grouped together can still be grouped when one is substituted with rest. So that means that even if you have notes that are grouped together and one of them is taken away and replaced with rest, the grouping will still be maintained. This is what I mean. So let's assume you have these notes. Because you can group, please, when we talk about grouping of notes, you can group quavers and semi-quavers together. It's just to put the beams together. But when you are grouping quavers and semi-quavers together, please let there be distinction. If you look at this one now, these two notes are semi-quavers and this is a quiver. So when I'm beaming them, I only make this to be double and I just extend this one once. So you have to be very good at doing that. But let's assume that for 1 minute, for example, that we want to change the middle notes as rest. So what will you do? Let's say this note, we want to change it as rest, which is this. Yes, you just leave it there and the beam is still maintained. So that means you can beam across a rest. As long as your beaming across the rest does not cancel any of the rules we have stated before. If you beam across a rest and it ends up that you are beaming the second and the third note of a 4/4, then you can't do that beaming because nothing should combine second and third note together. Okay, so this is very important to know that. So you don't say, oh, there's a rest there. So you see a quiver and then there's a rest and a semi-quiver or another quiver. You don't say, oh, because of the rest, I can't beam. No, you can beam across. Okay, as long as your rules are still maintained. And that brings us to the end of today's. Grouping of notes is a bit tricky and a bit technical. So you need to really practice and practice and practice to kind of get used to it. Okay, so today we've talked about grouping notes in simple times. We've looked at exception, and we've also looked at grouping notes in meaning bit time. Also looked at positioning stems when beaming notes and grouping rest with notes. Before I give you your assignment, any question? Is there anything you don't understand you want me to go through again?
No.
All right, good. Now your assignment is this. I guess everybody has gotten the workbook now, am I right? Have we all gotten the workbook?
Yeah.
Others, please, have you gotten the workbook?
Mine should be arriving either tomorrow or the day after, but this week definitely.
Okay, Sister Naomi.
I've gotten the book revision book, and I think the workbook is on this way.
Okay, so when you get the workbook, go to page 20 and 21, and do the exercise that is given to you there. The exercise you should do is exercise 1. Please, exercise. It shouldn't be. It should be exercise 1A to 1J. 1A to 1J. So what it's saying is that they will give you a music. You have to look for the mistakes in the notes and rest, and in how the mistakes in how the notes and rest are grouped, and rewrite them. You will see an example. They'll give you one example. You rewrite. So you see how it's done. You rewrite them and you correct the mistake. So please, you need to do that and submit it to me on or before Sunday. Please, I won't pursue you for the assignment. I expect every one of us to do it and send it. Just what you just need to do is do it and send me a good snapshot, something that is very clear, or a scanned copy, or however you want to do. Use pencil, please. Why I said you should use pencil is that so that you can easily rub it off in case if you made a mistake, and then you can correct it again. Use pencil. Yeah, so pages 20 and 21 in your workbook. Exercise 1A to 1J. Exercise 1A to 1J, please. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 regroupings to do. I guess the more you do these groupings, the more it sticks on you. So that's why I want you to spend time to do it. All right. And that is where we are going to end it if there are no other questions.